Well, I'm excited today because usually I do all these podcasts in my office by myself with some guest who's a top realtor somewhere in the US or Canada. But today I have a real human here next to me, so I'm really excited. And today I'm talking to Rachel Kokosenski with the Smallegan team. We're both in Grand Rapids, so this kind of worked out. And I'm really excited to chat today because you have become such an expert when it comes to all different types of investment properties, specifically like residential investment properties. And I wanted to chat today about that because I read some interesting data that said that almost 20 to 25% of homes last year sold to investors, which is kind of alarming, but it's also a huge opportunity. So I want everyone listening to be able to take from our chat today things that they could do to work better with investors, but also things that they could do to even price their own properties to maybe become more appealing to investors and to create some opportunities. So Rachel, welcome to the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, let's just get right into it. I have invested in real estate in the past from a purely investment standpoint, not just like enrich my life and provide a better home for my family. I like to buy houses, rent them out, and I think there's a lot of benefits there. Mm-hmm. But you've kind of made this your niche. So first I want to know, how did you end up in this niche of real estate investing when you could really sell a house to anyone and still make a commission?
Certainly. So I actually started investing myself back in 2018, bought some single families in Muskegon, and eventually bought a short-term rental in Grand Haven, and then also one in Palm Desert, California. So I personally got really interested in investing and finding out how I could make my money work for me in real estate. And I realized I liked it so much that working with other investors just sort of came naturally to me.
And I hear this so often. When people do it on their own, it also becomes like a calling card. Because when you're working on an investment property, you're finding the property, you're all excited, and then you're usually, for the first couple, doing some of the work yourself or coming up with some of the things that you're going to change. And all of a sudden, you're at happy hour, you're at coffee, and all of your interpersonal communication with other people, you're talking about it because it's naturally absorbing part of your life. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, they're curious and their wheels are spinning. And they're, well, Rachel, could you help me buy one? Is that kind of how you started helping others?
Not quite. Okay. I actually became a real estate agent here in Michigan about 3.5 years ago. And I initially did all, the regular working with regular home buyers and first-time buyers and helping people just find homes in general, just to kind of get my understanding of the market and understanding of how all of the processes here in Michigan work. But I still felt that call to work with investors and felt like that was really where I wanted to be. So I pivoted my business last year to be just about 90% investing.
I love that. And I think it's a really good reminder that once, if you're in real estate, mortgages, sales, whatever, and you find that niche inside of what you're doing that you truly enjoy more, it becomes less work and it becomes easier to then say this is my one thing. And I think too few salespeople have that one thing that they focus on. And I think it's almost like a disservice, or it's something that they're waiting to happen that hasn't happened yet. But now that you're in it, I kind of want to talk about the math.
Sure.
Because when I'm buying investment properties, one of the most important things for me, if not the only thing that's important, is really just do the numbers work.
Right.
So how do the numbers work differently for different type of investment properties? I mean, we have flippers, we have short-term rentals, we have long-term rentals. Mm-hmm. There's so much variety in real estate investing. How would you describe the math at those different levels?
Sure. And it is important to know as an agent that you would want to be able to do this math. And it's actually not that hard. I'm not a mathematician, but you do it over and over again and you get good at it. So let's take them one by one. So first we have short-term rentals. So a short-term rental is actually buying a business. So you have to look at a profit and loss sheet if that's an existing short-term rental. You have to look at what types of improvements you might be able to add, or maybe different things like a hot tub or something to improve that nightly rate. So there's a different way to analyze those properties. If it's not been used as a short-term rental, then you have to sort of do what's called a pro forma or kind of a educated guess. and figure that out. And there are people that can help you with those numbers. I partnered with somebody who does that and can write them up for my anything that we're looking at.
So there's a lot of market research, right? Like you have to look at like what's currently renting in that area.
Right.
And is there software tools that will kind of help you figure out like what the going nightly rate is for houses of different caliber in that area?
Certainly. There's a couple of them. AirDNA is one, Price Labs is another, and then just looking on Airbnb and VRBO and looking at what their competition looks like. So
one of the things I continue to see is like people get really excited about this idea of buying a short-term rental, but one of the things they don't look at if they're doing it on their own is that they don't look at like, does the city even allow this in the first place?
Exactly.
And a lot of people will say like, oh, well, I saw a Airbnb in Saugatuck on Airbnb, so obviously I could do this as well. But I'm assuming it's not that easy.
No, I always encourage people to call the township or the city where they're looking to buy one and make sure that they are legal to operate. Because yes, there are plenty of illegal ones out there, but if you go into it with the idea that you're just going to run it no matter what, you could get shut down very quickly, and then what are you going to do with this property? So yeah.
How does that affect the buying strategy and what kind of numbers make sense for a short-term rental? Knowing that like you're buying this place that like is a pure business, you're not buying this for fun, and the township could change the rules and not allow it, and you want to be able to get out with your clothes on.
Right.
How do you recommend going about setting a target price for a short-term rental?
So for a short-term rental, you want to take into effect what's coming with it, for one. I mean, if it's coming furnished, then it might have a little more value to somebody, because it can cost you upwards of 10 grand to start a short-term rental and put all the furniture in there and all the forks and knives and plates and all of that stuff. And then you have the desirability of it. Where is it located? Is it on a lake with frontage, or is it just in a city that's walkable to something? So you want to look at that as well. And then you have to look at the P&L. You have to see what kind of money it is making, or the pro forma, and see what it could make. But generally, I recommend to people that if the township or the city is having a lot of discussions about short-term rentals, that they should proceed with caution, because it probably means there's rules coming. So
now, in terms of like just getting to the number that makes sense to purchase it, I know for, let's say, a long-term rental property, a lot of people are familiar with the 1% rule.
Right.
Are there any math equations that short-term rental people use to figure out like the max price they should purchase a property for?
It's a little more nuanced with short-term rentals. I always recommend to people that they try to figure out what they would consider their average nightly price, and then do that by 60%. Because Michigan is seasonal. We have definitely quite a few months where you might not be renting it at all. So you don't want to assume that you're going to always get $200 a night, 365 nights of the year, right? So if you go off about 60%, that seems to give you a little bit of bonus if you get more in the off months as well.
Okay, and then you just kind of multiply that by 100 to figure out like if to get to the purchase price of the property?
Somewhat. Like I said, you have to also kind of look at the expenses just like you would a business, because if, for example, maybe it's an older home that has a boiler system, is that more expensive to run in the winter? You want to look at all those utilities, and just like you would analyze a business and see what the expenses would be. The other thing you want to look at is taxes, because property taxes always vary too. And so if you buy something and the property tax is higher in a certain area than others, that's going to obviously impact it as well.
No, let's talk about the people that don't even want to deal with renting it in the first place. We have flippers, right? I think flippers oftentimes get a bad name because you think of flippers and you think of like gentrification and like all the movies where like the mayor is trying to push out the animals from the city to like build more condos. But really, like, property flipping doesn't have to be a dirty word. And I know you've worked with a lot of property flippers in very unique ways. I don't want to get into the opportunities you're creating right now with them, but what does flipper math look like? What kind of numbers are important to property flippers?
Sure. So there's kind of an easy way to do flipper math, which can kind of give you an idea whether something's even worth doing the longer version of the numbers. So the first way that you think about it is ARV, which is considered after repair value, or what is the property going to be worth when you're done cleaning it up and fixing it up. And so you take that and you multiply it by 70%, and then you minus what your rehab budget is. and that will equal what your offer price should be.
Okay, that's amazing. And that seems like something that a listing agent or a seller could kind of also keep in the back of their mind when they're deciding who's my target audience for the property. Because you've established that, like, hey, we were in the middle of a home renovation and we just gave up. We don't have the funds to complete it, or we don't have the desire to. All of a sudden, the pool of potential candidates for the house, other than 1% of people that might want to do a $2 or $3K or a renovation loan to live in it personally, it's going to be flippers.
Right.
And you need to know how to price in such a way that it's going to make sense for the biggest possible audience.
Correct, and that's one of the things we're running into as a problem, actually, is that many agents will have a house that needs a lot of renovation, and they run the comps on it at the ARV price. And then they take just a little off the top to say, well, we're giving you a discount because we know it needs work. Well, if something needs $100,000 worth of work, it's not going to work if you take $20,000 of that off. You're actually going to find that you'll get more offers if you price it appropriately. You'll actually end up probably with a bidding war, as opposed to letting it sit on the market while people are giving you lowball offers.
Looking at that property, figuring out like what the potential it has to be, writing all that up, marketing all the potential at the same time at a low cost, and then all of a sudden you're going to get more eyeballs, you're going to get more offers.
Absolutely.
What about long-term rentals? I know I've always gone by the 1% rule, where if I find a property that will rent out for $3,000 a month, I'll pay a max of $300,000 for it and hope that I don't have to do more than $10,000 to $15,000 in renovations. And if I do, I maybe subtract that. What are some of the other kind of formulas that kind of your typical long-term property investors are using for single-family and multifamily homes?
Sure. So definitely for like a multifamily, we're definitely using the 1% rule, and we do run into issues where people are overpricing those, or they're pricing them against a regular house, and that doesn't make any sense.
Like they're
either.
pricing a single-family 3-bedroom home in the same way that they're pricing like a 1-2 multifamily home. Like the bedrooms are the same, but it's a very different housing stock. That, like, let's say your average first-time home buyer isn't even going to start bidding on in the first place.
Right. And the reality is your market of a duplex or a fourplex or a triplex or whatever is other investors typically. There will be some house hackers here and there, but the majority of them are other investors. So if the numbers don't make sense to an investor, you're not going to sell it at that price, because you're basically ruling out all those buyers.
That makes a ton of sense. Well, let's talk about what you've been doing recently. So you told me when we met a couple weeks ago that you have a new and unique strategy that is kind of like marketing to investors on steroids. You're partnering with a contractor to go out and look at properties with you that you don't even own yet, simply so that you can basically write up an opportunity and then market that opportunity to everyone that you know that's a potential investor. I want to hear all about this because it's a lot of effort. It's very high effort, but it's also something that you can convert on every time because it kind of makes you the go-to person for something. And since it's investors, you're just pitching numbers and not emotion.
Right, exactly. So this came out of an actual need that one of my clients had. I have a client that's from out of state who said, I want to flip. And I want to flip in your area, but I don't know any contractors. Can you help me? So I said, sure. So I ended up meeting this contractor, and we walked several properties together and ended up finding one for my client. And then he said, I'll do the renovation for it. And so I said, we could probably duplicate this on other clients. So why don't we form this partnership? So we talked about it, and so now what we do is I look for deals, and then he helps me figure out the rehab cost on it. We start with an estimate. I pitch that to a client and say, here's what I think you should pay for the property, here's what we think the rehab's going to be, and here's what we think the ARV will be. And so then I get a client under contract to purchase the property. Then we go back, perhaps during inspections, and have the contractor get his HVAC guy, his electrician, his plumber, whoever we need to come give us real numbers, and we lock in an estimate for rehab. And then we, purchase that property, he fixes the property, and then I list the property again on the other end.
How many of those, what is your proven process behind that? Because I can tell you've done this quite a few times, but how are you doing it in such a way where it's like replicable and manageable? Because I think for everyone out here that's listening, we're trying to build systems so that we can just make this one of the normal marketing things that we do on a weekly basis? Like, are you guys going out are you looking for properties every Thursday, sending them on Friday, meeting Friday night? Like, what is the actual process of how you're getting this done?
Sure.
Because if it takes 100 hours a week, this probably isn't going to be a fit for anyone.
Right.
But if we can kind of like wrap it into something and package it, I think this is something that like a lot of agents should be doing.
So yes, we've had some growing pains figuring that out, to be honest.
So it's not that easy, but it's doable.
It is doable. So what we initially started doing is we would just go look at everything.
Okay.
And then we were realizing that was just a lot of time spent on things that weren't necessarily going to pay off. It was great for me because I actually learned a ton about how much things cost to fix. So I was able to get a better idea when I look at something like, oh, I think that's going to be a $30,000 rehab or whatever. So that's kind of now ingrained in me, so I can get faster to the deal ideas for us. We meet on Zoom every Tuesday in the evening, and we go through these deals that I found on the MLS. We look at the pictures, and we do what we call our virtual walkthrough.
Got it.
And we come up with something from there. And then I pitch it to the clients and say, who wants to do this deal? Here's the numbers that I've come up with. If I get one that's interested, then the contractor and I go and actually physically walk the property and determine whether we can keep those numbers or if they have to be adjusted up or down. And then I get the client under contract. Again, they purchase it, hire the contractor, get the work done, and then I list on the other end.
Okay, so it's kind of like two different wins for you, because you're not only helping the buyer on the buy, you're getting the list on the other side,
Yep.
and then if it's someone who is going to be then renting that property out. I mean, there's so many different ways for you to insert yourself in that transaction, or that any realtor could. I think that's a win.
Sure.
But you're starting out virtually for most of the scouting. You're moving from virtual to creating the opportunity, marketing it. Is that like a flyer? Is that an email that goes out? Like, how do you actually get that word out to your investors? Or are you sending it mainly to like your top 2 investors first? Like, what does that process look like, the dissemination, I guess?
So I have different clients that want different things, obviously. So I basically kind of curate those listings to people and send it out by email. I might send them a link to photos, something like that nature. I will actually put together like a little deal profile of what it looks like for the math. And then when they say, yes, I'm interested, then we start talking and go from there. They also sometimes come with me and walk properties with the contractor as well when we go see them. But it's interesting because sometimes the things that look really good on paper, when you actually walk them, you find out, oh, this wasn't in the photo. So now we know we have to, there's a problem with the foundation, for example, or that we need to do new plumbing or new wiring or something. And so those things come up on that walkthrough.
Now, are there certain questions you've learned over time to like ask the listing agent before you take the time to go out there with your contractor? Because if it was just you, that'd be, a couple hours, but it's 2 different people going out there. So how are you knowing that like every property has some hidden stuff that might not be in the photos? How are you making the best use of your time before you physically drive out there?
Part of it is, getting to know other agents so that I can call them and say, hey, it's Rachel. I want to know about 123 Main Street. Is this something that your client's going to consider having a lower offer? I see it's been on the market 180 days. Can you tell me why it's been on the market? What's your feedback been like? Many times, if you ask them what their feedback's been, you can then solve that problem. Well, nobody likes that the bedrooms are too small, or nobody likes that the kitchen is really old or something. So I just make notes of those and find out how we can solve that.
Yeah, and everything kind of has a number, right? Like based on the square footage of the house, you can figure out what it's going to cost to do those things and to what level you would need to do it.
Right.
And again, like, this is the interesting thing here, isn't that you're coming up with an opportunity and figuring out a way to tell a story with numbers. The interesting thing is that you're doing this on the buy side. I think a lot of agents have thought of doing things like this on the listing side for their own properties, but this kind of flips the traditional role of an agent on its head, which I love for you.
Yeah.
Now, the third piece is like, where do you actually find investors? And that, I think, is like the, well, duh moment for a lot of people listening, because we would all like more clients if we had them. And I think a lot of people listening would go out there and do more of these first 2 steps of like finding the properties, making the opportunity if they had the clients. So where are you finding all these clients? You said you're newer to the area and to the specific team you're on in the last couple of years. So how do you know all these rich people or investors that can buy houses?
Well, I've been networking.
Okay.
So I found out who the investing groups were, and I joined.
Okay.
There was the one here in town. It's called the Rental Property Owners of Michigan. And I joined initially just as everybody else does, as an investor.
And anyone can join. These groups are open to the public.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I started going to breakfast. We have a weekly breakfast in the morning on Fridays. And I just started making friends. And for those of us who are really interested in investing, having other investors to talk about investing with is kind of fun.
It's kind of one of those things like with real estate. Like we all want to talk about it. Like I'm sure all of our spouses and all of our friends hate us because it's sometimes all consuming. But people tend to congregate with people that are doing the same thing as them.
Right.
So you found that like, hey, there's this group, it's free to join, and people get coffee every Friday. I mean, it sounds like ultra simple, but you're not doing what most are doing in your group, because there's probably 200 other agents in your group. You're showing up every single time.
Right. Yes, and there definitely are agents that come once in a while, and then they're like, well, I don't go anymore because I don't get any business. Well, if you don't show up, you don't get to know people. I mean, people buy from those they like and trust, so you have to build that.
And there's the proximity feature of like, there's not going to be, a diamond sitting on the table every time you go to get coffee.
Right.
But if you go 4 times a month, and there's 50 people every single time, someone is going to be selling a property that month.
Right.
And if you're always there, you're going to at least know about it and have that opportunity.
Exactly.
I know that when almost all of the rentals I've bought over the last 10 years have been from sitting across from agents just like you, and then at the end of the meeting I say, if you're selling any rentals soon, let me know. I'm always looking. And then I get a whole bunch that I don't take, but I get a lot that I'm at least getting the first set of eyeballs on.
Right.
And that's kind of how I create my opportunities on those.
Exactly.
So RPOA is one, and I think regardless of where you're listening, most major metropolitan areas have a rental property owners group.
Right.
Are there any other examples like on either Facebook or on online platforms that you've seen that like investors can connect with each other, or that realtors can connect with investors?
Certainly, yeah, there definitely are. Although personally, I'm not a big online person, so I would prefer to sit across the table and have breakfast with somebody and hear about, where they went on vacation, or what they're doing this summer, or what they are looking to purchase and things, and really get to know somebody on a more personal, friend-like level, which I don't think you get as much online.
Well, I think it kind of goes back to how you like to create opportunities. Like when we're sitting face to face with each other, it's a lot easier for me to figure out, oh, she might actually want to sell a rental property even though she didn't say it, because she mentioned she has all these cash flow problems, and their kids are all moving out of the house and they're taking a 2-year trip to Spain. Well, what's happening with those properties?
Right.
It kind of like puts you in the driver's seat when you're interviewing someone and just learning more about them to then suggest what you might be able to do together.
Exactly.
And it's so much easier in person. Plus, like, there's that value add. But I know some people use like bigger pockets online. Some people are more active than others in the discussion forums. Other people will use Reddit, different platforms. So it just really depends like what systems and places you can be in that fit with how you like to do business.
Right, and the other thing I'd add too is conferences. There's conferences for investors, and even as an agent, just going to those and learning more about like flipper math and learning how to price things from the investor side of that table will really help you as an agent too.
Well, too, I think it teaches you how to talk to people, right? So like when I get marketing in the mail, we all get real estate spam, and I see messaging that's geared towards first-time home buyers and first-time home sellers. I think that agent doesn't know the market, because when you're marketing to someone, you should have already done your research to know how many properties they own.
Right.
And you should then know exactly how to talk to them, what type of verbiage to use, what grade level to talk to them at. And the more you learn how to deal with the biggest segments of home buyers, which as we're talking about right now, one of them is investors, you'll be that much better at your job for all of your customer segments.
Absolutely, because you're still going to end up handling a listing potentially for somebody like a flipper, and that you might have buyers that are first-time buyers, right? So that you might be interacting with. So you still want to have some knowledge. You also want to have the knowledge of what's important to buyers in your area, so that you can educate your flippers on, oh, we don't need to overdo this property because the home buyers aren't looking for that. So it does help to get to know people from all parts of the transaction, I'd say.
Well, the interesting thing too here is that historically when I've worked with realtors who specialize in investors, they tend to always grow because they're just connected with more total people. Every investor typically has X amount of tenants that they work with, and when those tenants are moving to buying a house, you could poise yourself really well to get that referral as well. Whether you want to work that or hand that off to someone in your team that specializes in, let's say, first-time home buyers, there's just more total movement, like market movement happening when you focus on investors, which I love. So Rachel, what kind of advice would you give to someone who hasn't worked with a ton of investors yet, but wants to? I hear go to more events, network more. What kind of final parting wisdom would you offer?
That investors are a different breed of buyer. They particularly like you to be very direct in your communication. They're not very emotional generally. They don't really care that the kitchen's cute unless they're a flipper that wants to make it cute for a buyer.
It's going to save them money because it's already done. That's about it.
Yeah, so it's very cut and dry, but I've been given compliments regularly because I'm very direct in my communication. I don't try to, make something better than it is. I lead with the numbers, that kind of thing.
Well, I think when I hear that, I think changing, you can even run some of the emails you're about to send an investor through ChatGPT just to say, is this direct? Can you make it more direct? Can you take out abouts, maybes, and things that make you sound less sure?
Right.
When you're talking to someone and it's all about the numbers, you want to convey confidence and correctness. And obviously also be the first to admit when you make a mistake.
Absolutely. And that leads also to, I show my math when I send out an email. I say, here's how I got to this number. Here are the comps that I looked at. Here are the ways that I think you could improve the property and how much it would cost to do so. Or here's what the nightly rate is in your area if you're doing an Airbnb analysis or something. So showing that you have done the numbers also earns you a lot of fans.
I think everyone listening should really take that and start practicing that with all of their buyer clients, because if I'm, most buyers in today's market are not buying perfectly move-in ready homes that have everything they want.
Right.
And so if you can start training yourself to figure out what it's going to cost to do different areas of the house to base level, mid-level, luxury level.
Right.
Giving your clients that information is really the question that they have in their mind that they're not asking. And I think a lot of people do expect that level of service from a realtor, especially for the commissions that they're paying.
Right.
But that's not the norm of what we offer, because that's not necessarily something that we've been taught.
Yeah.
But it is what everyone sees on TV. So I highly recommend everyone trying that. Well, Rachel, if someone wanted to get a hold of you to, let's say they have a client looking to sell an investment property, or they just want to grab some advice or have a coffee or have a Zoom, how would they get a hold of you?
They can definitely call me at 231-261-2007 or email me at Rachel, Rachel, at SmalleganRealestate.com.
Awesome, Rachel. Thank you so much for joining the show today.
Great.